So this is the ABS pump, and back here is the ABS control unit. So since we have a code about the ABS pump control circuit low, so this control unit turns on the pump. As you can see, the pump is connected to this assembly over here. There is probably a connection issue within this assembly. What I want to do now is I would like to remove the cover of the ABS control unit so we can get access to the wires of the ABS control unit. We're going to check our powers and grounds to see if the ABS control unit is missing any power or any ground. I don't think so, because our scan tool is communicating with the ABS control unit, but we're just going to double check. If we have good power and good ground at this control unit, then the issue is going to be this assembly, because as you can see, we don't have wires that go between the pump and the control unit. So the control unit is connected to the pump internally. Okay, so let's check our powers and grounds and see what we got. I'm going to disconnect the electrical connector by flipping this little lever up. So here is our connector. Okay, so there are a couple tabs over here that I have to pry up. Right there, perfect. So this thing just slides out like that. Okay, now these heavy gauge wires that we have over here are our powers and ground wires. So I mean, we can look at the wiring diagram. I've done these multiple times. I know which ones are the wire for the power and which ones are the wire for ground. So the brown wires will be our ground wires, and then these red wires will be our power wires. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reconnect this connector to the ABS control unit. I'm going to grab my test light so we can test our ground wires and power wires. So this should be pretty straightforward. Now, I've seen defective wheel speed sensors cause the same light to be on the dash. We might have to just go back and forth here in the parking lot to make sure that our wheel speed sensors are working. If the wheel speed sensors are working and the control unit is getting good power and good ground, that ABS control unit is bad. You might say, why are you saying that? Because it's communicating. I believe the connection inside where the control unit connects to the pump is probably open. So now let's check our powers and grounds. We're going to check our ground wires first. I'm going to connect my test light to power. If I touch ground, my test light is going to light. So right there, test light lights. So I'm going to back probe the first brown wire. Okay, right there. So I got my back probing tool connected to the first brown wire. Now I'm going to connect my test light to the back probing tool. So right there, as you can see, test light lights. So our first ground wire is good. So now let's check the second one. Okay, test light is still connected to power. So right there, test light lights. So our ground wires are good. So now we're going to check our power wires. I'm going to back probe this red wire with a white tracer. So now we're going to switch our test light to ground. So I'm going to connect my test light to ground. I'm going to attach this back probing tool here. Actually, we might have to turn the key on. Let me see. Test light is connected to ground. Let me make sure our test light is working. Okay, test light is working. Let's connect this over here. I'm gonna go in the van and turn the key on. So watch that light. Key is on. Test light is not on. Uh-oh, this could be our problem. We should have power, at this wire. Okay, so it looks like we found the problem. Now let's check the next red wire. So the second red wire has power, but the first one doesn't. Okay, actually, I'm gonna disconnect this connector so you guys can see it. Let me pull this out. Okay, so these wires over here, as you can see, we have one brown wire here, and then there's another one on the other side. So these two brown wires are our ground wires, and then these two red wires should be our power wires. So watch this. So when I connect, the key is still on in the vehicle. When I connect to this first red wire with a white tracer, the test light doesn't light, but when I back probe this one, test light lights. So we need to figure out why we are missing power on this wire. Okay, test light doesn't light when we back probe this one, but here test light lights. So now I'm gonna bring up our wiring diagram so we can figure out what powers this wire. So let's go to our wiring diagram, just like we looked at. So we have two red wires, red with white. So this wire here is the wire that doesn't have power on it. I'm gonna highlight it. Okay, this wire is the wire that doesn't have power. So it is pin 2, and it comes from fuse 4. It's a 40 amp fuse, fuse block 1, type of fuse/relay box. Okay, so we have to go check fuse block 1. Let's see where this is at. I believe this is in the vehicle. This is a cargo van. Component location. Fuse block 1. Let's see it. Fuse block 1 and fuse block 2. So it looks like, okay, so fuse block 1 or fuse block 2 is gonna be under the dash. Okay, so let's go check out the fuse. All right, I'm gonna turn the key on. Actually, right now we're trying to figure out why the ABS light is remaining on and the brake light. So the engine is running, brake light is on, ABS light is on, and ESP light is on. So I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key on. So now we're gonna check the fuses for the ABS control unit. Now, the red wire, the red power supply wire on the ABS control unit is not getting power. So according to the wiring diagram, fuse 4 is what sends power to it. So my test light is connected to ground. So we're gonna check these fuses. So as you can see, the test light lights. I'm gonna check the other side of the fuse. So this fuse is good. This is good. This is good. This is good. Actually, I'm gonna check all the fuses on this fuse box. So this fuse is good. As you can see, test light lights. This is good. This is good. Okay. So I'll check all the fuses and then I'll bring you guys back up. I checked all the fuses under the dash. All the fuses are good. So I'm done checking all the fuses. But for some reason, that red wire with a white tracer is not getting power. So that wire could be open somewhere from the fuse box to the ABS control unit. We could have an open between the ABS control unit and the fuse box. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to send power, straight power, to that wire. We know that wire comes from the fuse. I'm gonna send power to it to see if our ABS light will go off on the dash. If it does, then we will be 100% sure that that's the only problem we have, because I'm suspecting a defective ABS pump. Maybe it's not, now that we're missing power, it's probably not the issue. I'm gonna send power to that wire. We're gonna start the engine to see if these lights will go off, okay? So now let's do that. Before I send power to that red wire with a white tracer, I wanna check our wake up signal wire. So there is a wire that gets power when the key is turned on. So that wire is pin 28, okay? It says ignition switch out. It's a black wire with a red tracer. So I didn't check that. I want to make sure that that wire's got power to our wake up signal. So it's going to be this wire over here. Let me see if I can back probe it. Yeah, that wire. So now I'm going to use my test light. I'm going to connect my test light to ground. The key is on in the vehicle. I'm going to connect my test light to this back probing tool. As you can see, test light lights. I'm going to turn the key off. When I turn off the key, that test light should go out. Did it go out, Matt? Yep. Key on, comes on? Yep. Okay, good. So now we know our wake up signal to the ABS control unit is good. Okay, so now I am going to connect to this red wire with a white tracer, the wire that's missing power. I'm going to connect to it. And then we're going to use a jumper wire between this positive terminal and that back probing tool. I'll get a jumper wire. So let's see. I should have a good fused jumper wire. I'm using a jumper wire because if that wire is shorted to ground, if we send straight power to it, we might burn the wire. So it's always good to use a fused wire. Okay, so I'm going to use 2 fused wires. Okay, we're going to use these wires to send power to that wire that's missing power. So I'm going to connect this. So I'm connecting this to my back probing tool right there. And then this guy is going to connect. Oops, let me move this over here because we don't want this to touch ground. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I have power down here. So we have power here, power there. Okay, so now we are sending power down the wire that's missing power. So which is this wire over here, the one I highlighted, pin 2. Okay, so now I'm gonna go in the vehicle and start the engine. Let's see if the ABS lights will go off on the dash. If they go off, then we have to figure out why we're missing power there. All our fuses are good. We most likely have an open somewhere, and that can get pretty interesting and pretty fun. So let's see. I'm gonna start the engine. The ABS light is still on. Let me see if I can erase the ABS code. Let me turn the key on. Let's see if I can erase the code. We're still screen recording, Matt. So I think we're good. So no more codes in the ABS control unit right now. Let's start the engine and see. Okay, right here. So ABS light went off on the dash. Now I'm gonna do something. So I'm gonna go under the hood and disconnect that power, that jumper wire that we connected to the ABS control unit power supply wire, to see if the light is gonna come back on. I'm gonna turn off the engine. Watch this. Engine is off. We're still sending power down the red wire with the white tracer. I'm gonna start the engine now. So as you can see, the ABS light is off now, okay? And we don't have a code in the ABS control unit. Let me turn the key on. No codes in the ABS control unit, okay? Okay, so that's good. So now I'm gonna go under the hood and disconnect that jumper wire. After disconnecting the jumper wire, if the code that we had in the ABS control unit comes back, which I believe it will, that will be a confirmation to us that the issue is only that one wire that's missing power. Okay, so I got that wire disconnected. Matt, remember when we first started it, the brake light went out, right? Let's see if it's gonna remain on now. We might have to drive it for that light to come on. Okay, I'm gonna turn it off. I'm gonna turn the key on. Let's go into the ABS control unit. Oh, I think I just saw it. Let me start the engine. Well, it went off. I'm sure if we drive it, if we drive it long enough, those lights will come back on the dash. So we have an open in one power supply wire circuit of the ABS control unit. Okay? All right. So, we're definitely dealing with a couple issues here. So now, let me see what else we need to do. Let me turn the key on. Let's go back in the engine computer. Remember, we had a code about the ignition switch not communicating, I think. That's what it said. Let's go back in the engine computer. We have two codes in the engine computer. Now we have a bunch of codes. Lost communication with ABS. This was because we were disconnecting differential pressure sensor signal implausible. Yeah. All these codes was because we were doing our testing at the pressure differential sensor. So the fact that we have a differential pressure sensor implausible code, that's good. This tells me that the pressure differential sensor is good, the wiring is good, so that DPF needs to be replaced. So I'm gonna clear all these codes. Let's see if the ignition switch code is gonna come back. Yeah, ignition switch code is still there, and the DPF code is still there. Lost communication with electronic ignition switch, central gateway module. Okay. We're gonna have to look at some communication waveforms here. Okay. Check engine light is off because we cleared the codes. ABS light is off because we sent power down that wire. Actually, let me go check that wire and see if maybe it's now getting power. Let me turn the key off. Turn the key on. I'm gonna go under the hood and check for power on that wire really quickly.
Out there?
No, you can just stay here. I checked the wire on the ABS control unit again. It's still not receiving power, so we have to figure out why. So I guess we're done. Let me get my tool out of the way. It's getting late. We're gonna have to end here today. I'm gonna tell you what we're gonna do on this tomorrow, and then we'll go from there. So we don't have enough room here. Let's go under the hood so we can talk about what our next step is going to be. All right, guys, so as you guys saw, this van clearly has a couple of issues. So one thing we know for sure right now is this van needs a DPF, okay? DPF needs to be replaced. The ABS control unit is good, but it's missing power. We checked the fuse. Our wiring diagram said that the red wire with a white tracer, it gets power from a fuse under the hood. We checked all the fuses under the hood, they're good. So since that wire still doesn't have power at the ABS control unit, that means there is an open between the fuse and the ABS control unit. Now, since it's getting late, we're gonna stop here today. Tomorrow, I am going to trace down that wire to figure out why it's not getting power. And then we're gonna fix the open. There's an open somewhere. And then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna check the ignition switch to figure out why it's not communicating to the body control unit, the SAM control unit. I think that's what the code said. There's no communication between the ignition switch and the body control unit. So we're gonna have to look at some communication waveforms and figure out what's happening. So we're gonna leave this right over here. I don't know how long this video is gonna be. We're probably gonna break it down into multiple parts. We'll see how it goes. So let us know how you like the video. Hopefully a lot of the stuff we did today will make sense to you guys. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing. Hopefully we didn't lose our screen recording part, Matt. So we've been starting to use our screen recording on the scan tool, which is great, but you know, it's just a lot to deal with. So thank you, cameraman Matt, for being here. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thanks everybody. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks everyone. See you next time. We are back on this 2008 Freightliner Sprinter van with a 3.0 liter engine. This is part 2. We did part 1. We did the diagnosis. We determined that the DPF had to be replaced, and also the one of the wires on the ABS control unit was not getting power. So I sent the customer the estimate. The customer approved our estimate. We replaced the DPF. Actually, we also ended up replacing the catalytic converter, the diesel oxidation catalyst, because the person who worked on the van before cracked where the sensor goes onto. I will show you that because we have the DPF and the old catalytic converter removed. We have it over here on the bench. I will show it to you. So we did the work off camera. Unfortunately, we could not film as we were doing the work. I'm gonna show you the new DPF that I installed, and then we're gonna take this vehicle on a test drive. Now, the other thing I did was, after our diagnosis, remember the ABS light was remaining on the dash, the brake light was remaining on the dash as well. We found out that there was one wire that was missing power. Now, I tried to look through the harness to see if I could figure out where the open was, but unfortunately, I could not find it. So what I did was I ran another wire. So I told the customer, I said, at this point, we either have to rip off the entire wiring harness so we can trace down that wire, or we can run another wire from the battery and put a fuse in between the battery and the ABS control unit. We can send power straight to that wire to have the ABS control unit work properly, and that will cause the lights to go off on the dash. So that's basically what I did. I don't like doing that. It's always good to figure out where the open is in the wiring and fix it. But this wiring is very complicated. It goes under the van and it has a bunch of twists and turns. So we couldn't trace the wire completely. We ran another wire. I will show you here under the hood what we did and how we ran that wire. So the first thing we're gonna do now is, before we go under the vehicle to look at the new DPF that we installed, I would like to bring you over here on the bench so I can show you the old catalytic converter and the old DPF. So this is the old catalytic converter. So the person who installed this, they cut down this bracket. I don't know why. This bracket goes on another bracket against the cylinder head. So this was cut off. And then this is the reason why I replaced the catalytic converter. Okay, so as you can see over here, this is broken. So I told the customer, there is no way I'm letting this vehicle out of our shop with this. We have to fix this. We gotta replace this cat. And look at the welding job that was done. So the person who did this just didn't do a good job. The customer said, okay, he approved our estimate, we replaced that. Now, the other thing I also replaced was this DPF tubes. We got these replaced. Now, here's the DPF. Actually, if you hold this DPF, it's very heavy. It's filled with soot. This van has over 200,000 miles. I'm gonna show you what I found in the DPF. If cameraman Matt can see in there, yeah, check that out. Yeah, nice. The DPF is completely clogged. So if you see this in your DPF, just know that your DPF is bad, okay? So DPF is clogged. We were right. We replaced the DPF. Now, when I was replacing the DPF, the other thing I noticed was every time I replace a DPF, I replace the hose that goes between the pressure differential sensor and the metal tubes that connect to the DPF. And as I was disconnecting those hoses, the other tube on the pressure differential sensor broke. As you can see right here, one tube is missing. So I also replaced the pressure differential sensor. So now this vehicle should drive a lot better, because what was causing this vehicle to lose power was a clogged DPF. So this DPF was creating a restriction in the exhaust stream, which was causing the vehicle to lose power, because when you have a restricted exhaust, it's going to prevent the engine from breathing properly, because the engine is not going to be able to suck in enough air if the exhaust system is clogged. Okay, so we were right about that. I also checked the injectors off camera to make sure that we don't have a clogged injector or an injector that's overspraying, because if you have an injector that's overspraying, that can cause your DPF to get damaged. That can clog your DPF sooner than it should. But this vehicle has, once again, this vehicle has over 200,000 miles. So this DPF has never been replaced. This is the original one, so it's time, okay? So now let's go under the vehicle. I am going to show you the new DPF and the new catalytic converter that we installed, and then we're going to show you how we fix the wiring of the ABS control unit. We are here under the vehicle. This is our brand new DPF. As you can see, we have a shiny DPF here. We got a new DPF installed, and we also installed a new catalytic converter up there. I hope you can see it. I hope Matt can see that. So we have a brand new catalytic converter installed. We replaced the catalytic converter temperature sensor. We have a new DPF, so we're good to go. So now let's back out so I can show you the wiring of the ABS control unit that we fixed. So I ran a wire. You see this tape I put over here? I fixed this as much as I could. So there is this wiring harness. So in this loom, I have a wire coming from the battery. So it's a power wire. I put a fuse in between. So this wire is connected to the wire that goes to this electrical connector on the ABS control unit. So now we have two permanent powers at the ABS control unit, and there is a switched power or ignition power when the key comes on. So now when we start the engine, if the wiring is good, if the only issue was the wiring, our ABS light and brake light and ESP light should no longer remain on the dash, okay? And since we replaced the DPF, this van should drive a lot better. Now, I told the customer there was an ignition switch code that we didn't address. The customer said, because I told the customer, if we are going to fix that as well, that's more diagnosis. We're gonna have, because the main concern was low power and ABS lights on. We figured that out. You know, we were missing power at the ABS control unit. We fixed that. The low power was being caused by a clogged DPF. We also fixed that. Now I told the customer, if he wants me to fix the other code about the ignition switch, I'm gonna have to diagnose it. That's more diagnosis time. And then we're gonna give him an estimate for that. The customer told me, just fix the DPF issue and the ABS light issue, drive it. If it has power, because he uses the van for work, he told me I'm gonna pick it up, drive it, and then later on I will bring it back so we can figure out why there's a code for the ignition switch. So I didn't check that. I believe that ignition switch code will cause the check engine light to remain on the dash. Just so you know, the check engine light might remain on the dash while we're test driving the vehicle. But right now, I'm gonna pay attention to how the engine how the vehicle drives, because the vehicle was losing power tremendously before, and we don't have to have an ABS light and a brake light on the dash. So with that being said, I filled up the cooling system. We have enough oil in the engine. I'm gonna double check before we go on a test drive. Let's make sure we have enough oil in the engine. Now this engine takes 5W40. As you can see, we have our oil level is slightly lower than normal. So I am going to add a little bit of oil in the engine, and then we're gonna go on a test drive. All right, so let's see how much oil we need to add. Now, on these Sprinters, you do not want to fill up the oil level to the maximum mark. You kind of want to fill it between the maximum and the minimum mark, because when the engine runs, the oil heats up and then it expands. So when it expands, the oil level rises a little bit. So if the oil level is too high, you're going to have a too high oil level light on the dash, and you don't want that. So I'm putting, let me show you guys, we're putting 5W40 full synthetic oil in the engine. So these small diesel engines do not take 15W40. I've seen people put 15W40 in these Sprinters. That oil is too heavy for these cars. You don't want to put 1540 on this. It's 540. So let me check the level. So we went up a little. I'm gonna put more. Okay, so right there, I'm gonna add just a little bit, because I want the oil level to be right in the middle between the maximal mark and the low mark. So I'm gonna add just a little bit more. Okay, so right here, as you can see, it's right here in the middle. So I would leave it here, because when the engine gets hot, this level will increase just a little bit. So that's fine. All right, so now I'm gonna close the hood so we can take this on a test drive. Before we go on a test drive, I am going to clear the codes, and then I have to let the engine computer know that we replaced the DPF. So now we're gonna go into the engine computer. Now this is a Freightliner Sprinter, but we're gonna scan it as a Dodge Sprinter. It's a 2008 Sprinter. Now the good thing is, right now the ABS light is off, so you guys can see the dash right there. ABS light is off. Remember, the ABS light was remaining on the dash. I'm gonna start the engine. We have a little long crank because this van has been sitting out for a while, and it snowed, so the battery is a little weak. So check engine light remains on. That's probably because of the ignition switch code. No more ABS light, no more brake light, so that's good. So now let's see what we got here. Let's do a code scan. Let's scan all the control units on the vehicle. We have 3 trouble codes: exhaust pressure sensor voltage too high, exhaust pressure sensor plausibility error, and then lost communication with electronic ignition switch central gateway. So I don't think we have this exhaust pressure sensor code before. This is new, but we had this ignition switch code before. So, and I told the customer, because we're gonna have to spend more time diagnosing this to try to figure out what's going on, and the customer told me we're gonna do that later. So I'm gonna back out. I will clear all these codes. Let's see if the exhaust back pressure sensor code will come back, because I don't mind checking everything. When the customer brings the vehicle to our shop, he tells us what we should fix, and when we scan the vehicle, we print out all these codes. We tell the customer if the issue that we're fixing is causing these other codes to be in the engine computer as we do the repair, those codes will get taken care of. But if there's another issue, because clearly this vehicle has so many issues, one diagnosis fee is not going to allow us to pretty much check everything on the vehicle. We can scan it and focus on one specific area, but these other areas that need attention, we're going to have to get more diagnosis time. Because right now, for example, we have a code for the exhaust back pressure sensor. The issue could be the sensor, the issue could be the wiring. So at that point, if we keep chasing all these issues, we might spend 2 or 3 days trying to fix everything. So the customer is not paying us for that. So if the customer wants us to fix everything, we're going to have to charge more, or we're going to need more diagnosis time. Okay. So right now, our exhaust pressure sensor voltage too high code is still there, and our lost communication with the ignition switch code is still there. Let's go to our functional test, special functions, initializations. I'm going to initialize the mass airflow sensor. Let's initialize the rail pressure sensor. New DPF, we did install a new DPF. So we're going to initialize that. We're good to go. So now what I'm going to do is, as we are driving, I am going to look at my boost data PIDs. I want to make sure that the turbo is creating enough boost and the vehicle has power. And after that, we're going to wrap up this video. So I'm going to graph my boost pressure data PID. I'm going to start the engine. I don't like how it's taking a little while. Right now the check engine light is off because we cleared the codes. Matt, if you can show the dash. So right there, as you can see, the check engine light is off. Okay. Once we drive, that ignition switch code will come up, and then I'm sure the check engine light will be on. So we're gonna drive. I'm gonna put the scan tool right here. Matt can put the scan data on the screen as we're driving. So let's see. As soon as the power is restored and the ABS lights are gone, he's going to be happy. Our boost pressure is 978 HPA. I'm going to put the scan tool right here. So let's go for a spin and see how this thing drives. This van doesn't really have power. I mean, it's driving better, but I'm like flooring the accelerator pedal right now. Interesting. We're not building enough boost. The maximum boost that we're building right now is 1100 HPA. Very odd. Very, very odd. Now I wonder if our actuator on the turbo is working. So I don't want to go far. I'm going to turn around here and go back to the shop. Let me figure out where I can turn around. Actually, we might just have to go to the roundabout and turn around and come back to the shop. I mean, the van is driving a lot better than it was before, but you know, it could run better. Actually, it could run better. We don't have enough power. So I'm flooring the accelerator pedal right now. Matt, if you can show the dash. I'm flooring the accelerator pedal, and yeah, so we're doing about 40 miles an hour right now. So we are definitely losing power. So, and I don't hear the turbo kicking. I don't hear the turbo whistling. You know, when the turbo kicks in, you can hear it whistling. Okay, so we've fixed a couple issues, but we clearly still have more issues. Okay, we fixed the ABS light that was remaining on. You know, we replaced the clogged DPF, but we clearly still have another issue. So let's drive back to the shop. I'm gonna, yeah, so it's picking up some power right now. So Matt, let's show the dash. Oops, I'm driving, I gotta be careful. So we're doing about 55 miles an hour right now. We're going up to about 60. Okay. So it's, you know, we definitely, we did something, okay? The vehicle is fixed, but not completely, okay? It's better, it's running better than before. So let's get back to the shop. Once I get back to the shop, Matt is gonna keep the scan tool on the screen so you guys can see. We're not building enough pressure. I mean, we're not building enough boost pressure. We should build enough more than this. So I'm gonna check our actuator on the turbo, and we're also gonna check the wiring of the exhaust back pressure sensor, because it's really easy to get to. It's right there on the EGR cooler assembly. So we're gonna check that, and then we'll go from there. So I'm gonna drive back in the shop, and then I will bring you guys back up. We are back in the shop. I have my Autel scan tool connected to the vehicle. So I'm using my Autel because when it comes to bidirectional test, the Autel scan tool tends to be better than the Snap-on scan tool. So the first test I'm gonna do is I wanna command the actuator. I wanna turn it on and off using the scan tool to see if the lever on the actuator is gonna move, okay? So you guys have seen me do this test. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move the air filter box out of the way. I'm not gonna remove it, but I'm just kind of gonna push it to the side. Let me see if I can. I kind of wanna have this pushed to the side. I'm gonna remove this cover. This, up and down? Yeah, so this lever should move up and down when I turn it on and off with the scan tool. So let me make sure the scan tool is communicating with the car first. Because if that lever is not moving, the car is not going to create boost pressure. So the car is going to lose power, because we have vanes inside the turbo that open and close to cause the turbo's turbine to spin faster and increase boost. So the scan tool is finishing scanning all these control units. Let's see. So right there. Okay, we have the same codes that we had on the scan tool on the Snap-on scanner. Back pressure sensor trouble code. Actually, as I'm looking at the wiring here, we have some weird wire connectors there. I'll show you that in a minute. So we're gonna go into the engine computer. We're gonna go to active test. So we're gonna find the, where is it? Right here. Check the boost control. So this should allow us to open or actuate the turbo actuator. So right there. Now I'm gonna turn this on. Oh, it's moving. Can you see that? So Matt is gonna show you that the actuator is moving. All right, so I can control it with the scan tool. The fact that it moves, that tells me that the wiring of the actuator is good, the actuator is good. So if it's not building enough boost pressure, we could have a leak somewhere. Now, we don't have a boost pressure code. The back pressure sensor code that we have could be causing the van to lose power as well. So we can already rule out any potential actuator issue because the actuator moves. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna check out this back pressure sensor. Let's check the wiring and make sure the sensor is working.